All right, my friends, welcome back to the Justin Prince Show. Today is going to be a special day. You're going to meet one of the coolest dudes you're ever going to meet. Someone that he's lived all the real life stuff from. It's that kind of rags to riches story, and we'll cover a wider range. But my man Jamil has become a best-selling author. He's built an incredible multi-million dollar business. He's a great family man. He has a beautiful young family. And part of one of the reasons I relate to him so well is, we both came from zero financial literacy at all, and so one of his passions now is helping folks to have financial literacy and, to go from like just making some dollars to actually, creating wealth and some freedom in your life. So today's going to be an amazing discussion. Jamil, one of my favorite people, bro. Every time we connect, we're always like, yo, we got to do this way more often. So
I know.
appreciate you jumping on, brother. I'm super fired up to have this conversation.
Man, I'm excited to be in the house, man. It's so funny. It is true. Every time we get back together, it's like we're on the phone for a half an hour and a half. We look up and we're like, oh my gosh, it's been it's been a lot longer than we anticipated. But I think it's just because like I honor you, I value you. Even the other day I was just telling you how much I appreciate the man you are, the father you are. I see how much you do with your family, how much time you spend with your kids. And I think for me, that's always what this journey has been about is how can I position the family, but how can I also have a greater impact and income? So I'm excited for the conversation. Um, Man, thanks for having me here.
Well, look, I think we relate more to people's struggles oftentimes than we do their victories. So when people, today they meet you, man, he's best-selling author and he's got these multi-million dollar businesses and, you know, building wealth for his family. Like that may be hard to relate to. Walk us back through the journey. Let's kind of go back even as a kid growing up and so on. Because I think your story of where you've come from, what you've needed to overcome, the mental mindset shifts, the tactical skills you've had to build is truly a great lesson for all of us to say, listen, no matter where you're at right now, you can get to where you want to go. So can you kind of take us back through that journey, lead us up to some of these key learnings and principles that you've gained along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a Southern California guy, grew up in a city called Pasadena, and to a single mama. And my father was in and out of prison. My father probably lived with us for maybe a year of my life.
Hmm.
I always say Papa was a Rolling Stone. I have four brothers and three sisters, but just from my mom, there's just three of us. But all of my brothers and sisters and I are tight. My mom is one of those ladies, Justin, that she puts the world on her back, and you kind of wonder, how do you do that? I think you and I are family guys now, so I think about how difficult that is to raise a family by yourself.
By yourself. Yep.
Um, and she experienced a lot of loss, a lot of death early in her life. Her brother was in a gang, and he was actually one of the first gang members that was shot and killed in the city of Pasadena. Her parents died within a month of each other. So she just went through this difficult season and didn't know how to cope with it. Unfortunately, like many folks, she turned to alcohol and drugs, and my father also turned to alcohol and drugs, and so we just struggled, man. Like, grew up on welfare, Section 8 housing, food stamps, and that was just our existence. I always say the best thing that ever happened to me was when I was in the third grade, my mother moved us only about 8 miles east, and it's amazing what proximity does to you. It is amazing what community does for you. And so I just got really lucky. I got lucky that she decided to move. I got lucky that I met some friends that were just well ahead of their years. And I got lucky that these friends were just really into sports and working out and lifting weights. And from a young age, just knew that I wanted a football scholarship. And so my buddies and I just worked really hard, became a pretty good high school athlete, went on and received a scholarship to go play football in college, and graduated towards the top of my class. Like loved playing ball, loved it with my friends. I loved the university that I went to. But I think, like a lot of people, when I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I really just went to college because, I wanted to continue my athletic career. And so I got out of school, got into sales right away. It was like the only people that were calling me back. Hey, you have a good GPA, you play ball, like come sell something for me. Eventually ended up in pharmaceutical sales with Johnson and Johnson, as you guys have heard of. Then went to medical sales, and then man, at the age of 31, had a really unique opportunity presented to me. It just made sense to me. I thought that we could go make a big impact and income, build an organization, really breathe life into people, learn how to become leaders and raise up leaders. And from there, it looked like everything was great, but it wasn't. It's funny how that is. But my wife and I started to have tremendous amount of struggles. We got pregnant with our first child right away,
Mm,
and I never had a father, so I was intimidated to be one. And
mm,
I don't know any other way to say it. And I asked her probably one of the craziest things that a person could ask their wife, because I was scared and I was intimidated and I didn't know what to do. But I asked her if she would um, potentially have an abortion. Dads, don't ask that question. It doesn't turn out very well. So I think from that just came a lot of resentment. And one day, she left, and I had to fight really hard to get her back. Um, and then just made a decision. Just made a decision that I wanted to be the best human being that I could be, uh, build the best organization that I could be. And now that I had this little boy in the house, how could I create an existence for him that was so completely different than the one that I grew up in? And that passion turned into purpose, and that purpose turned into, making the right moves, I think, with our money and learning how to become an investor and wanting to build wealth and meeting guys like you and all of these amazing fathers and influencers and executives. And now I get to be here on the Justin Prince podcast and talk about it.
and that is just an incredible journey. So let me walk you through a couple questions. When you felt this intimidation to be a father, uh, so much so that you suggested abortion with your wife, what were you feeling? What were those? What was going on in your heart? What was going on in your mind? What was the emotion you were processing through?
Fear, um, resentment. Um, it's amazing because we found out that we were pregnant on Father's Day. And you would think that that would be a day of jubilation.
Like a happy
I
day, yeah.
mean, yeah. And I couldn't believe it. And, oftentimes, if you don't know, I'll speak for myself. When I'm unsure and I don't know what to do, you have that fight or flight syndrome. And instead of fighting, I wanted to flee. And the only way that I could think about maybe doing that was, how can we get rid of this problem? And it's so wild because that was only 13 years ago. And now I know that that is the absolute opposite of how you want to deal with something that you perceive to be a challenge. But I didn't know that then. I was young, and like I said, it's hard to become something you've never seen before.
Mm. You talked about the proximity, like that move, the 8 mile move that your mom did, and how those new friends and new neighborhood just changed the power of that proximity. How how have you changed proximity when it comes to being a dad? You know what I'm saying? Like being a father to where you now have the confidence and you get these four beautiful kids and this beautiful family. Like, have you modeled mentors? Have you what have you done to change proximity where it changes the way you look at it?
I've been so lucky. I think some people would call it blessed, some people would call it fate, some people would call it luck. I'll call it all of it, Justin. Like, I'm telling you, I got really, really lucky to have a really unique opportunity come into my life at a really unique time. When my wife and I were not on speaking terms, we lived in the same house, but we didn't live the same reality or paradigm. And I got an opportunity to start a direct sales business. And the mentors that
Mm,
came with that changed my life. And it was almost like God had known specifically who needed to guide me through not building a business journey, but building a life journey, building consciousness journey, building a leadership journey. And so I just got lucky with these two ladies, believe it or not, and they started working with me and they helped me unpack. I call it junk in the trunk, a lot of the junk that I had in my trunk. And from them inviting me to different webinars, introducing me to personal development, introducing me to new speakers, inviting me to sort of tell behind them and get this education was something I never had before. And so, what I always say, without those two ladies, Karen and Kim, if you're listening right now, my family's legacy has absolutely been changed and transformed because of all of the hours that these ladies spent with me. And we laugh about it now, but I always, I always joke with them now. I go, "How did you deal with me? Like, how did you spend so much time with a knucklehead like me?" But without them, it wouldn't have happened. So my proximity changed, I think, by fate. To have these people come in and then they introduce me to a world that I just gobbled up, man. Like once I started knowing that there was people like you out there, people that's writing these books, people that's talking about be the one, people that's talking about leadership and what a man looks like in leadership. That I couldn't stop. I would read one book and then that would turn into 30 and then that would turn into 70 and I would go to a seminar and then obviously as you put yourself in these different places you meet these different people and you become like-minded, but that was really the beginning, was those two ladies.
So that direct sales business, the income, the business, that thing, that was all almost secondary to the man you were
Yeah,
becoming, like the person you were growing into.
that's what the passion became about. I couldn't That's what the whole my second book, the 12 shifts, that's what that whole book is about, was all of these breakthroughs that were happening that I didn't anticipate. I never asked for this. Like, this is not what I was looking for. I was trying to figure out, how do I keep my wife in my house? How do I make enough? I mean,
Mm,
she didn't earn that much as a teacher, as an educator. It was driving me crazy. And so, how can I get to a place to where I don't necessarily have to feel like I depend on her income? And so that's why I really stepped into this industry, but it was out of desperation and necessity. I was not looking to grow myself. I would I didn't need to change. The world needed to change. And then what I learned was, in order for me to see the world to change, I needed to change.
yeah. Yep.
And then that became a fascinating experience where I was like, holy cow. It's like that movie The Matrix, if you guys have seen it. Keanu Reeves just starts to learn that he has all these abilities that he never knew that he had before. And every single time he learned he had a new ability, it's like, oh my gosh, I can fly, like I can fight, like I have consciousness, all these things. It became more and more of a passion to see what's next. And that's really what it was like. How much of a bigger human being can I become? And it's so incredible, the correlation. The bigger you get, the bigger your income gets.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. One of the philosophies that changed my whole life was actually from Jim Rohn. It's a Jim Rohn philosophy. He says life's not about what you get; it's about who you become in the process. And so, even as a young man, I was like analyzing things that way. I was kind of like, who am I going to be surrounded by? What's the environment? What am I going to learn? Like, basically, who am I going to become? As I'm hearing you say this, I just think back to like the person that I have become, and then obviously who I'm becoming. I've taken that simple philosophy of it's not about what you're getting; it's about who you become. And that philosophy changed my whole life. Let me ask you this question. You've really crushed it in your business. Like you really crushed it, like top, probably 1% in the world of what you do, right? Uh, how did you deal with money at first? So, like sometimes you'll hear of an athlete, for example, that comes into a bunch of cash, didn't come from money, doesn't know money, and just goes and buys freaking everything they can buy, that kind of thing. How did you process and deal with as you started to become this person? held your marriage together, started to learn these new skills, and all of a sudden you start making some dollars, and in this case, significant dollars. What
Hmm.
was that process like for you? How did that hit you?
Oh my gosh. So I think I processed it like most people would process it that never really had any money, and then all of a sudden they were making monthly what they were making annually. It's like, what's next? Like, what can I buy next? What are the next shoes? What's the next car? I got lucky early on because that only lasted for a short season. A guy came into my life. His name's Craig. He's much older than both of us, Justin. Craig is probably in his 70s now, and he was actually an entrepreneur in my organization that I mentored, but he started mentoring me on finances and building wealth. He spent years in other direct sales organizations, and he had kind of seen the volatility that could happen. And so he says, "You help me, get healthy and start reaching my goals. I'm going to help kind of teach you the money game." And he did early
So
on.
he
And so I
wasn't part of the
really,
company at this point?
he was.
Oh, he
He
was.
would
Okay.
just start. Yeah, he just had gotten into my organization. Um, we just bonded right away. It was really weird how it happened. But I think he could see in me though too how like hungry I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he just started breathing life into me, and he always said, I do well for myself. He's multi millionaire, and he says, I do well for myself, but you're going to do way better than I've ever done. And he just started mentoring me and coaching me, and he was big into real estate. And so he started taking me to go look at real estate with him, to go look at the deals that he was doing. And I'll tell you this story. It's a funny story. So I was early on Instagram, probably you were too. And I remember all of these guys, these early on influencers. A lot of them were these kids, and they had these presidential Rolexes, Rollies, they would call them, and they were pure gold and just they were fire. Like I remember sitting in my little tiny room at this point, looking at Instagram. Was like, dude, I can't wait until I get enough money so I could go buy this thing. And my wife and I went up to Las Vegas, Nevada, really to go save our marriage. It was like one of those weekend trips to say if we could get through this, like let's try to save this thing. And I went into one of those Rolex stores, and the lady said, I said, how much is it? And she said, 37. And I was like, turned to my wife and I said, oh my gosh, it's only 3,700 bucks. Like if I save up for the next couple months, I could get it. And I remember the look on this woman's face, a look
Yeah.
of disgust, and I can't believe this dumb dude is in my store. And she goes, no, sir, it's $37,000. And I remember just like dropping my head and giving her the watch back and walking out. And I told Craig that story, and he says, you're going to be so happy that you didn't buy that watch. And within, you know, a, a specific amount of time later, we could definitely buy that watch and many more watches. And I just remember the growth that had taken place, that I really moved from a consumer mindset
Yes.
to an investor mindset. And I was just like, it was amazing. Less than 2 years later, I was like, I would never buy that watch.
Let's just dive in. Well, you know what? Before you get into that, one thing I want to honor about you, but then I also want you to talk about is when you hear your story. There's an immense amount of hunger in your story. Hunger to find some good friends, hunger to play sports, and not just be on the team, but hunger to like be good enough to go play college football. You know what I'm saying? Like that takes a lot of discipline, a lot of effort. And then even when you were introduced to business, you had the hunger and also the humility to learn from these women. How some people would be like, what are these women going to teach me about being a father for crying out loud, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then you're given a book and you didn't just get the book. Most people don't get the book. The ones that do get the book, it sits on their shelf. It's a hungry person that gets the book, picks the book up, finishes it, and then asks for another one, right? Where does that hunger come from for you? Just that deep grind and hunger to learn and grow and change and change your life. Where does that come from for you?
I think it comes out of lack, comes out of scarcity. I distinctly remember, so like I said, my mom, when she moved us to a city where most people in the city were doing well. Like we were at the very, very low end of the totem pole. And these friends that I made, Justin, they, you know, most of them had intact families. Mom and dad were there. Dad worked traditional job. Mom, either stayed at home or she was in the workforce. But it was just that comparison. Seeing them what they had and what they could come to school with, and we would go and do sleepovers at their house. There's no way I would invite you to come to my house and do a sleepover. Bro, that would never happen. And so just comparing, my rollerblades to their mongoose bikes and just wanting more. And I remember sitting in my room, which I shared with my uncle at some times, my older brother at some times. Like I didn't have my own room until after college, and just wanting more, just desiring and want more. And I learned a lot of lessons, fortunately and unfortunately, from growing up of what I didn't want to do and what I didn't want to be. And so that has always motivated me and stuck with me. And it sticks with me now. It comes from a different place now. I think back then it came um, from lack, from scarcity, from comparison. Now it comes obviously from wanting to create, from passion, from purpose, to wanting to help other people level up and creating a legacy for my family to where our last name means something different than it's meant since I've been alive. And so it comes from a different place. But I would say that that's the origination, is just not having the things that you wanted to have. Um, and I will say that early on, it wasn't a ton of humility. And that's why I say with my mentors, how did you guys deal with me? Because it was a tremendous amount of ego. There was a tremendous amount of um, you don't know more than me. How can you can't coach me? You've never seen anyone like me. I'm going to be the best person you've ever have laid your eyes on. It was a lot of that energy, which that energy has gotten me through a lot of things as well. But it also can be, something that can be your downfall. So I had to learn how to shift that energy and make it into positive energy and not energy that runs people away.
Yeah. Uh, it's interesting sometimes sometimes the most successful people are the more humble people, meaning they've been through the grind. They're not the ones talking trash. Like they're just, but then sometimes you know, the least successful is the one that their ego's the highest, right?
Sure.
Their pride is so high. And the word humble, it comes from it's a Latin word that it means humus. So not hummus, but humus. And what it means is organic, dark, rich, fertile soil. So it's the kind of soil that you can plant in, and the soil is wanting to grow. It's looking to grow.
Mm,
It's trying to grow. It's really fertile. So you plant it, boom, it can grow. And even though you had kind of that ego, you also had that desire to grow too. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you
yeah.
had that hunger and that humility to grow. And I think that's, to your point now, you've now taken that with a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of the know how challenging it is, the ups and the downs of life and business, to where you have a little bit more wisdom and perspective. So let's talk about this idea of being an investor and an owner versus a consumer and a customer, basically. Like how walk us through this
Yeah.
process. And by the way, I want to give a disclaimer here, or I want to give a setup here. Sometimes, Jamil, my experience has been sometimes when you talk about financial things, financial fitness, whatever, we either tune out because we just don't get it. So we kind of feel
Yeah.
stupid, we just don't get it. We kind of tune out, or we act like we know more than we do. We're like, I got my plan. And the truth is, we have no clue what we're doing, right? My friends, I just want to invite you, like he and I both, we were not taught this stuff institutionally. Like we learned this kind of stuff in just the grind, by good mentors, trial and error, that kind of stuff. So I want to just invite you to say to yourself, what if you could be an owner and you could be an investor? And
Mm,
you say, yeah,
mhm.
but not me. That's for someone else. No, no, no. Like Jamil's story is a story of someone that, maybe statistically he wasn't supposed to be where he's at, but if he can do it, you can do it kind of story. So Jamil, with that
Yeah.
setup, walk us through some of the mindset stuff that you've done, some of the principle based stuff that you've done to build a financial fortress around your family, coming from really from nothing.
Yeah. I want to encourage the audience to fully take what you just said into consideration. Like 10 years ago, I was sitting in a 700 square foot house, um, no savings account. Wife had left. And I know this because I just posted on my social media last night a video that I made for her in February 2014, basically asking her to come back. So here's what happened. Again, wasn't anticipating this. It's been a journey from one book, from one seminar, from one mentor that led to another mentor. Having Craig come into my life was huge, changing my mindset. I had always been on the consumer side of things, always. Once I met Craig and started to see what he was doing, I wanted to become on the owner side of things. I never, ever, ever just wanted to have active income. You and I work really hard, man. We do what we do, man. We encourage people every single day. We probably wake up with other people on our minds and our hearts before ours. Just like, how can I help these people break through? That's where I've been for the last 12 years. But in that pursuit, I never just wanted to have the active income, wake up every single day and work my tail off. I want to do it because I think it's part of my dharma and why God's put me here. But I've always wanted passive income. Once Craig started breathing life into me and started showing me that on the ownership side of things, on the asset side of things, you're able to have a bigger impact and you're able to build wealth for the future. And I always wanted that. I had forgotten that that was something that I always wanted when I was on welfare and Section 8 housing. Basically, we had a landlord. His name was Bob Jones. And I remember when Bob would come over, like we would all straighten up. Like my mom would be like, Bob's coming over. And all of a sudden, all of us kids had the most perfect attitudes and respect, and we're cleaning up everything and trying to take care of that guy's property. And I just remember the power in that. But I had lost that over all those years of life. And so once I started developing, these leadership capabilities that I didn't know that I had, once I started learning skills like delayed gratification, which I didn't know that I had, once I started learning skills of how to control my mindset and my emotions instead of just diving into emotional conniption and start to learn emotional management, then that started to play a big part in how I start to look at building wealth. Once I started to build a family and knew that basically my game plan was by the time I was 43 years old, I wanted to have the option of being completely free because by that time my son would be 13. And I started to think about where I was at the age of 13 and how much I wanted to be present, but I didn't want to have to work if I didn't want to work. And so all of these skills that I was learning on how to build a business were also the skills that I needed and the mindset that I needed to start building wealth. And so those things for me just really start to go together. Um, one of the biggest skills that I learned was how to not think so myopically. Before, I would just think about how do I get to the next day? How do I make the next dollar? How do I get to the next month? Now, as I started creating an organization, looking at forecasts and floor plans, all these things, I had to start to learn, okay, how do I look at things in a decade time frame? Because what's going to happen today or tomorrow or next month is so small in the context of what's going to happen in the next 10 years. You're doing that right now. Like the journey that you're on, I guarantee you're not thinking about 2024. I know that you're thinking about 2034 and
Yeah.
where the company is going to be and where the people are going to be and like the impact's going to be. I promise you. So this mindset shift that was happening was all in congruence of me just trying to become a bigger and better person. And then these skills that I was learning along the way, um, patience being one of the biggest ones, those started to now affect the way that I looked at money and the way that I looked at creating wealth.
So if you're listening right now and you say to yourself, okay, that's awesome for him, but man, like I'm behind the eight ball. Like, how did you go from behind the eight ball to an investor? Because you have to, like for example, if you got debt crushing on you, you're not thinking about
Sure.
investing, you're thinking about surviving, right? If you're like barely paying the bills each month, you're not thinking about like I'm going to create an empire 10 years from now. You're like, dude, how do I like, it's kind of like hand to mouth. Like, how did you,
Sure.
what happened? What steps were you taking to go from hand to mouth, barely paying the bills, paying off debts, that kind of thing? What were you doing to
Yeah.
transition from that kind of mode into like, man, now I'm like having a little bit of a surplus. Now I have some dollars to invest. Like what happened there?
Yeah. So I really want to encourage the listeners to actually kind of just shift where you're at right now. If you are behind the eight ball, man, first and foremost, there's nothing wrong with you. Like most of us aren't taught this stuff. Like there's a lot of playbooks that are out there, and this is a playbook that wasn't taught to me, it wasn't taught to Justin, and it probably wasn't taught to you. And so don't feel bad or ashamed about where you're at, but where you're at is your foundation that we can build on. Just please hear my heart on this. I also want you to shift the way that you're thinking about this. If your thinking is, man, I'm behind the eight ball, so this is all I can focus on, I want to help you shift that. The way that you're going to start building and climbing yourself out of this is you got to see yourself out of it. If you see, then you will be. If all you see is limitations, lack, and scarcity, then that is exactly what you're going to keep attracting into your existence. And that's where I was too. So, first and foremost, you have to see a picture that's out in the future that you want to create. That's the first thing. Please don't get bogged down with just being stuck in your current reality. The first thing that you have to do is get into the mode of creation. I believe that we're part of a creative being, and if you can tune into this creation by thinking about where you want to be a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, then I'm telling you, you'll step into it. Now you just need to ask yourself, do I want to do it? And if you say yes, ask yourself again, do I really want to do it? And if you say yes, then ask yourself, what am I willing to give up to create it? And that's going to be one of the most important questions because I'm going to give you the steps, but most people, Justin, were looking for the how, and the how is always pretty darn simple, but it's the difference between that person's why. You guys have tapped into my freaking desire, and that desire really came from when. Oh my gosh, that just hit me. That desire came from when that little boy was born, and my wife didn't honor me anymore, and she wanted to leave. And now I was going to have to step into something I was very afraid of stepping into, which is being a father. And I refused to have this dude live the way that I lived. That became
Mm.
it was no way that this guy's life was going to look like mine. There was no way. So now let's get into the how. So now that you've made these decisions, how do you do it? The way that I did it was a very simple method. You're going to think that it's so simple. You don't tune out because it's so easy. All I did, if you're making income right now, then you're already ahead of the game. All you got to do is just break out 3 piggy banks. Okay. Whenever you get paid, let's just say you get paid $2,000 a month. It doesn't even matter what the number is. You're just going to take 10% of that income and you're going to put it away to savings, piggy bank. Just put it in there. Another 10% of that income, right, which is only $200, you're going to put it away for investing. And that last $200, you're going to give that away. Give it away to your church, give it away to a charity, give it away to, I don't care who you give it away from to, but now you're starting to build a principle and you're tapping into a law, which is the law of reciprocity. If you give, my friend, you are going to receive. So now you're just living off of 70% of that income. Well, the listener is saying, well, Jamil, bro, you don't understand what my bills look like.
That's right.
Like, I got kids and, I got struggles and I can't just live off of 70% of my income. Fine. then live off of 97% of your income. Just start with the 1%. So if you get paid 2 grand a month, 1% goes to savings, 1% goes to investing, 1% goes to giving away. And as you start to do this, then you are going to tap into something called consistency and compounding. And if you tap into consistency and compounding in anything in life, then eventually you're going to be successful. So start small. It sounds crazy, but it absolutely works. Then you say, okay, well, what do I invest in? Don't worry about it. As you start to build that habit and you start to build up that bucket, I promise you, you're going to start to figure out where to start to invest in. I promise you. But that's where you start. And so we started super small, man. I had to pay off over $100,000 of student loans and debt. Then I paid off everything, Justin, and my wife had the nerve to come to me and said, "Hey, there's another credit card I never told you about." Dude, if she would have had that conversation with me 2 years prior to this growth and development I would have I had gone through by that time, we probably would not be married. But I had gone through so much growth that, I took it like a champ and took care of it. So that's really where you start. But the key is to start.
So good. It's just so good. And my friends, you know how he kind of prefaced, well, he did two things. He kind of tilled the earth a little bit to like make sure you want it. Like make sure you're ready for it. Okay, cool. Once he did that, then he prepared you by saying this is simple. This is a simple concept. Don't True genius is simplicity. Like true genius is you strip complexity away and you keep it simple. But that's the hard thing to do. Like an iPhone, you pick up an iPhone, there's so much complexity going on in that machine and in that tech, but it feels simply just like, a little 3-year-old can open the phone and know what to do with it, right? That's the power of what he just taught you is the power of the simplicity of just doing it. And this idea of building those disciplines. And Jamil, same thing. It's like, can't do the 10? Cool. Then let's do 1%. If you can't do 10%, let's do 1%. Like let's just get you started. Start building that muscle. Start building that concept. And I agree with you 100%. Once we start building a little bit of a nest egg, we'll find investments. You
Yeah,
have a dollar or two, we can figure out your investing, strategy. But that simple takeaway, that simple, steps, those as simplistic as those are, most people will hear that and do nothing, and you'll stay where
yeah.
you are. And the problem with this compounding that he's talking about is that compounds on the negative too. It's like if
It
you
sure
stay in
does. Come
100,000,
on.
yeah, it's not going to be 100,000 very much longer. It'll be 120, 130. It just
It's
compounds on
true.
the negative, right? Because the interest just starts compounding. We want to get you on the flip side where your interest is compounding on the positive. Like one of the principles that changed my life, Jamil, was the power of doubling.
Yes.
And so
Oh
it's
my
like it's
gosh,
like it's
yes.
like a dollar can turn into 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64. Like a dollar's compound, it's doubling because we've all you and I've seen. I sat with my son, he's 20, and his friend in my den the other day, and they're just getting into business, right? These young kids, 20 years
Mm-hmm.
old kids. And I said, all right, here's the deal. And you've seen this exercise. I said, if I could give you $1 million today, I wrote on my board, $1 million today, right? $1 million in your bank account. I'm like, what would that mean? I try to have them kind of sense it and feel it. They're like, okay, $1 million. I said, or I'll give you a penny. That the
Mm-hmm.
difference though is we get to
Double.
double the penny for 30 days. This exercise, dude. I wrote on the board 1, 2, 4, 6, 4, 8, 16, 32. I'm 7 days in or whatever it is, and I'm at 64 cents, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I said to my guy, are you guys sure? We're 7 days in, you're at 64 cents versus a million. And then week 2, same thing. Week 2, you're at nothing, week 3. And then all of a sudden, then the compounding starts, then
Yeah.
the doubling starts, and the principle that you're teaching, kicks in. And it starts so small. It's like watching grass grow. At first, you're like, what are we doing here? Does
It's
this even
so
work?
true.
So just kind of pick up, pick up with that. Like how are you teaching these people the discipline to start small and the discipline that you can actually turn? I'll make one last quick point. You go buy the flat screen TV for $1,000. It didn't cost you $1,000,
Sure.
dude. Because we could take the 1,000 and think of it this way. What if you could turn the 1,000 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64? Would you pay $64,000 for the screen TV? No way. Then take that dollar and let's go double that over time.
Sure. Yeah. I just had this conversation with my son as well. One thing that I encourage the listeners to do is just go download a compound interest calculator and just play around with it. And I do this with my kids all the time. I just did this with my 13-year-old, and his name's Ezra. And I said, Ezra, if you can get $100,000 invested um, by the time you're X, Y, and Z age, whatever. And then I just showed him over every about 7 years how that was going to double, what that would look like by the time he was 35. And it blew his mind. One of the challenges I run into now is so many of the people that we're helping, they make really good money. I mean, the world would say, my goodness, you're making 200,000, 300,000, half a million. Like, you're good.
You should be, yeah,
And
exactly.
And the reality is, oftentimes they are in a worse position than someone who might be bringing in $50,000 a year. And it's because of this thing, this emotional mismanagement that a lot of us have. And so, how do we start to help people? I think the first thing is we start to get them really curious about, well, what is it that I really want? We all want things. Like I want to have all these muscles and six packs and stuff like Justin, but I also want to eat lemon meringue pie all the time. Those are two wants. How do you help people now start to balance out which one do you want more? And I think that's where a lot of us go wrong. And so the one thing is just really teaching consciousness and really deciding what is it that we actually want to do. I think that's step one that I take with a lot of folks that come to us. And then I think step two is just getting some wins. Oftentimes, we've just taken so many L's. There's just been so many losses, been so many seasons of just taking losses, man. Just like, dang, freaking tire went out in the car, and now I gotta buy three more iPhones for this family, and then, like that, I couldn't pay the interest on that credit card 1 month, and so now they killing me. Like, how can I just get some L's or get some wins? And so we will start small and we'll just start stacking wins. And it's
That's right.
amazing what happens to human beings once you start to see victory. You
Yep.
like it. You're like, oh my gosh, I like this. And then you start to see transformation happen once that happens. Once you can start stacking wins over time and you see and you give transformation right away. So I think it's simple. It's definitely not easy. Just like losing weight, honestly, it's simple. It's just not easy. And so that's why that first part, which is the decision and desire, is the most fundamental and foundational part.
So good. By the way, going back to the simplicity, my friends, if you won't build the muscle at 50,000 in earnings a year, you're not going to build it at 300,000 in earnings a year. You got to build the muscle at some point. You got to start building the disciplines at some point, because you'll be at a million a year and you're broke. You're just broke all the time and chasing credit cards all the time and so on. You got to build the muscle. You start building the muscle, and again, that's kind of the commitment. Now, Jamil, to this point, man, we could go. You and I could go with you forever. So
Forever. I know. I
this is
love it.
one of the things that you're passionate about. One of the things that you're teaching people, like you're doing challenges and free challenges and some coaching and just different things to help people get their life in order and get their business in order, get their finances in order. So what's the best way for us to connect with you and to get more of you in our life?
Yeah, I mean, follow me. I'm at the real Jamil Frazier on all of the places. People go Instagram and YouTube and all the stuff I put out. Financial and business YouTube videos that people can just digest. I'm always talking about this stuff now. I think it's just become a huge passion for me. I've done such a great job of showing people how to build great businesses. I realized I didn't do a good job of showing people how to create and preserve wealth. And so, that's what we are up to, and get in contact with my team and I, and yeah, we can definitely have a conversation and join one of our challenges. We do challenges once a month, and we would love to see you in the next one.
Love it. Listen, brother, I freaking love you, dude. Respect you a ton. Like I just feel such a kinship to your story and such a such an admiration level to who you are as a man, who you are as a person, who you are as a business owner, who you are in the marketplace, showing up to add value to serve people. Your heart and you're like your love and heart for people, it just pours out of you, dude. It just freaking pours out of you. And I just am so grateful we had this time. I hope we do it many times more in the future. And I just appreciate you setting, being a standard, like a beacon to people, regardless of where they're at now, that they can change their whole life. Right? It's one thing to say it if your life was already awesome. It's another thing to say, "Hey, listen, I had to start at the bottom and work to the top." And it's a real example of what's possible. So I love you, bro. Appreciate you coming on.
Likewise, man. Appreciate you having me on the pod. We got to get you on mic.
Okay, I'm game anytime. Appreciate you, brother.